the self, and various psychological theories will give you an explanation of what the self is, and they will offer more specific sort of theories and explanations that may answer your question. That okay, so what am I? What is this personality? Who am I? Kind of thing. And then in the spiritual traditions, there are different kinds of answers. Well, the real soul is self is your soul, or something like that. And then in Hinduism, there's the only real self is Atman. Everything else is illusion. And then you have in Buddhism, well, all of it is an illusion. There is no self. Okay, who could blame any of us if we get a little confused with all these so many different accounts? But the thing is that it's something totally different when you actually start getting acquainted with yourself. When you begin to actually know yourself. It's very different than coming up with some theory or some explanation. And so I think that so far, in our time here, you have been discovering quite a bit about the self. When you are told or asked to bring your attention to the sensations of the breath here, or whatever you would be told around the nostrils, or whatever sort of variation, and I've been asking you to bring some equanimity to it, and just keep bringing the attention back again and again. And all kinds of other things happen, right? It doesn't, you find yourself only ever so often bringing the attention actually into making contact. All kinds of other things are going on, uninvited, right? The self manifests without being asked to manifest, and sometimes it can annoy us or drive us a little crazy. The thoughts and the stories and the opinions and that come up. I'm talking about something very concrete, like from moment by moment. Then I suggest that okay, let's carry on the meditation while we eat, and it so happens that we have amazingly delicious food, and so we find ourselves, oh, finally lunch break is coming, or something like that. See, that's the self manifesting. That's what I mean. That's something other than bringing the attention to the breath, or when you are eating, bringing the attention to the sensations of the taste, and the sensations of moving the spoon into your mouth, and the sensations of the texture of the food in your mouth, and the taste. And so every once in a while, I certainly, was my sense that there was some mindful eating going on, but not only mindful eating. Do you know what I mean? There was also like, wow, this is yummy, and should I have more, or should I not have more? This is how the self manifests. and so you are when you are getting a chance to really get to know the self that you are, not somebody else's theory about it. You follow me? Not some kind of abstract idea, not even your own theory, because we tend to have theories and opinions about ourselves, don't we? But having some kind of a take on what kind of person I am is very different from actually seeing how this person or personality, how it sort of works moment by moment by moment. You see what I mean? To actually witness it, to see how it manifests, how it shows up. That's very different. And the interesting thing is that I mean, it's sort of puzzling maybe that the self starts showing up precisely when we are trying to do something else. You see what I mean? Bringing the attention to the breath, or bringing it to the eating, or to the walking, or whatever it is. Are you with me? Is that the case? So what does attending to the breath, however you do it, here, or what does it have to do with the self? Well, in itself it has nothing to do with the self, except that here's how the self makes it its own. Well, maybe if I do this long enough, I will become a better person, or more spiritual, or more enlightened, or right? Isn't that how the self again manifests? It's sort of it has its own agenda, and so it kind of it gets involved in even this activity. You know, I haven't told you that, okay, bring the attention to the breath in order that something will happen. I've been just saying, okay, just bring the attention to the breath. And so the self goes, what's the point of this, right? What's the point of this? What's the goal? What's the objective? That's how the self works. And so you have a chance to observe not just how the self works in abstract, but moment to moment, in your own moment to moment flow of experience. And there's the only, interestingly, the only way that anything changes is if it is touched directly. So you are essentially touching the manifestations of yourself directly when you witness it directly, as opposed to indirectly or in abstract when you read some interesting theory and you feel, wow, maybe that applies to me. Do you see what I mean? I don't know if you're following me, that you are here.
It's quite confusing.
It is, okay, so I'm trying to draw a distinction between knowing something for yourself, by yourself, directly. Sometimes I like to think of it in some context as authentic knowing, because it's yours, versus as distinct from having a theory and or an explanation or an idea that somebody gave me, you know, some teacher or some book, and then I said, that's interesting, I didn't know that that's what I am, but okay, see, that's not really knowing. That so here I want to emphasize this because of course in the end I want to say you gotta do it yourself, the practice, because you gotta know it for yourself. Nobody can do it for you. And so whatever form the practice takes, I don't know what words to use because I hesitate to use the word practice, because anything that we say, it ends up becoming an idea. Okay, now I'm doing this kind of practice. All I'm saying is that you came to this retreat to do something that you weren't even sure what it is, but you end up encountering yourself directly in however ways it manifests. Uninvited. It's like the uninvited guest when you are not theorizing about it, when you are not sort of forming some kind of an idea about it. The self is very sneaky. That's another way of saying it.
To whom?
To the one who wants to know himself or herself. Have you ever tried to, if you are sort of like into self-inquiry, and let's say something was going on in you that didn't leave you alone, let's say some kind of a weird anxiety attack whenever you were in the presence of somebody, I'm making this up, let's say some potential boyfriend, girlfriend, maybe when you were a very young kid, or maybe some scary authority figure, a father, a mother, somebody like that, and every time you're in their presence you tighten up here, right? And so then some later time you find yourself having this kind of tightening up and a kind of anxiety, almost like an anxiety attack. I'm making this up. It could be some other kind of reaction. It could be an angry outburst and you say, oh my God, where is this coming from? Anything like that. And then you want to kind of catch it. You want to, okay, I want to really get it. So you turn your your attention to it because you want to control it. So does it show up when you are saying, come on?
No, it doesn't.
Huh?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. It doesn't usually. So that's what I mean. That the self that we actually are, the way that we moment to moment actually manifest the self, it's a very sneaky thing. The self. If we want to turn around and say, okay, come on, now I want to look at you, it goes into hiding. And so then when you end up doing something like that in a way does not make sense, why would one want to bring attention to one's breath again and again and again? It sort of in itself has no purpose, it has no sensible goal, right? So then that's when the self shows up. Because the self always wants to have something that it's going to get, goal. You follow?
What I'm thinking about this is that the self is manifesting all the time, but is actually doing what it's supposed to do, because nothing is contrary. So because of no contrast, then I cannot see it. But in practice, because I am doing a nonsense, selfless act, then the self tends to manifest because it always is, and then I can see it because it has a contrast.
Yes. So that's how when you are doing something else, then the self shows up. That's another way. That's just what you said. That when there's something going on that does not involve the self, then the self wants to show up and take it over. Okay.
Why are you doing that?
But
why are you doing this, that action, for example, no?
The self will say that.
Yes,
The self is
exactly.
saying,
Yeah,
why are you doing that?
yeah. Why are we doing this? You know,
To
and
me,
then
it seems more as if the self manifests as an obstacle. I mean, when you look for it, it doesn't show itself. When you want to stay with the breathing, it says, no, I want you to think about your vacation.
Yes.
It seems to show as an obstacle, actually.
yes, of course, it does not think of itself as an obstacle. So we have to be very, because it's very sneaky, you know. So as see, this is what happens in especially in Buddhist and also Hindu tradition, where the self, and why not even Christian tradition, the ego. It's an obstacle, you know, so we need to get rid of it. I need to get rid of myself because it's an obstacle. Now, who is saying that? You see, who is saying it?
But the self is also saying that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's why it's tricky. That's why you say it's tricky.
Yeah, that's how it is tricky, and probably you have already experienced all kinds of battles between the self that is there, showing up when it's not invited, and then you want to get rid of it, like another self, as though the self splits itself in two, and then the two sides of the self are battling.
Bipolar disorder? Multipolar.
Well, it's the kind of multipolar that all of us have. You know.
Different West.
Huh?
Different West.
Yeah. So.
But I think it's a problem. Maybe it's not a problem. It's during the time, generation after generation, people create a religion and fears.
Yes.
And we are taking over the time all that fears.
So
And
yes.
It's also how to get out from that state when fears appear.
Okay, so we have to be careful when we take that step, how to get out of it, because notice the self is right there,
The
wanting to
self
get
is,
out of it.
saying get out. No.
Yeah. Right. So that's why it's very tricky, and so in this kind of practice, if you can bring the attention to the breath or whatever it is that we decided to be the object of meditation. I want to always add that, because there's nothing sacrosanct about, let's say, the sensations around the breathing here or any other place. But we just decide to do it. Why?
Who decides?
Huh?
Who decides to do it?
It's an algorithm.
Yeah.
It's an algorithm.
Yeah. You know,
Intuition. Maybe.
it's a so you, let's say, like, okay, I'll take the responsibility here. I asked you to do it, and you agreed to do it.
Who agreed to do it?
The self-agreement.
The self agreed,
Yes,
yeah.
Self-agreement.
yes,
Okay.
it's all about self, and so then, yeah, because, and why is it that yourselves agreed to this self's suggestion?
Because we think we can get something out of it.
Yeah, okay, so now that, yeah, so that takes
What's
us,
in it for me?
Yeah, what's in it for me? Who's saying that?
Yeah.
Self. Who else?
yeah, and so, I'll tell you a little, one of my favorite Zen stories. Some of them are really funny, and it's sort of relevant to this, because especially in the Zen, Rinzai Zen tradition, I don't know, Soto as well, but there's a keen awareness of the paradoxical nature of the practice. The sitting practice, whatever you are doing, and so here's a little Zen story that illustrates, the Zen master being very aware of how tricky the self is. So this young guy comes to this Zen master wanting to, and he wants to be a very serious student. You know, he really wants to be enlightened. And so the Zen master asks him, so what do you do? Like, what do you like to do? Well, I want to be enlightened. Well, but you know, just when you are just having fun, something that you enjoy doing. Well, it turned out that this young guy is a butterfly catcher. He collects butterflies. You familiar with this?
Yeah, very good.
But I'm embellishing it, you know. But now I want to be enlightened. I'm not into that. You know, I just want to be, get your teaching and please teach me. And so then the Zen master said, go catch that really special butterfly that is sort of like a really big, beautiful butterfly that is unique to this area where the Zen master was living. And so this student, being obedient, respectful, pulls out his, the catcher and starts, and soon enough, of course, he's really into it because he enjoys, catching butterflies. So soon enough, he's really into it, and he's looking for this one big magical butterfly, and suddenly he sees it, and he leaps after it, but he didn't catch it. And suddenly he sees that, okay, it landed again on another rock. So he goes and he leaps even bigger leap, and he falls into the abyss, the guy. Because he was so into the...
Dramatic.
Huh?
So dramatic.
Yes, so this illustrates, how the self, the self of the student was saying, I want to be enlightened, please teach me. And the Zen master knew that this guy, like everybody else, would never voluntarily give up themselves, the self. So the Zen master was a little sneakier than the self, so he had him do some activity that completely absorbed him. In this case, catching the butterfly. And he didn't notice what happened, So it's a metaphor for the dissolution or shattering of the self, fell into the abyss. But it only happened not by the Zen master saying, go stand on that cliff and throw yourself into the abyss. None of us would want to do that.
Do you honestly think that what you call the self could stop exist and manifest in one being?
Okay, well, let's take that question. Okay, could the self just stop manifesting? Probably not. Not as long as there's human civilization and we are part of it, and probably as long as we are in these human bodies. I say probably, And here is why, we are one species among others, and I made this point briefly at the last weekend retreat that, all animals have their sort of ways of survival. They have their particular strengths and particular vulnerabilities, right? So as humans, in physical terms, we don't compare really well with many other creatures in nature. We are pretty vulnerable, but we have this huge brain. That's our survival mechanism. And if we want to be more specific about what exactly is the survival mechanism, it is the self. None of us experiences the brain directly, right? But we can relate to the sense of self. So the sense of self is all about surviving, enhancing itself, enhancing its well-being, propagating itself, and accumulating, you know, to sort of further affirm itself. That's what the self does. That's what it was meant to do. Right? And so it's not going to disappear just like that. I mean, the human civilization would disappear. If you think of it, all of civilization culture, it's all built on that principle of wanting to, that we want to survive, we want to protect ourselves and our kids, our families, we want to feel safe, and then after we feel reasonably safe, we want to feel comfortable, all the conveniences and so on, and there's no end to how the self sort of like manifests.
Alright, so if we're not looking for the actual dissolution of this self, then what are we looking for?
What are you looking for?
Well, it's a I have my own model. I have my own model of this, but I'm here to hear yours.
Right, but you see, the reason why I turned it back on you, I don't mean to put you on on the spot,
don't worry.
but it's because usually a question comes from certain premises, and so you might sort of like reflect, okay, where does this my question right now, where does it come from? Is it, you know, as you already kind of said, you know, like you have your own take on things, and you kind of want to see how, if my take on things might agree or not agree.
Or hear something new, or
Yeah.
maybe more evolved.
Right, but
yeah.
so this is all, again, we could sort of reflect on this as yet another manifestation of the self, you know, like wanting to have an you know, an understanding of the self, but in it, so even when the self is seeking understanding of itself, it often has an agenda that may not be very sort of easy to discern, but it's still an agenda to kind of affirm myself. Are you with me, those of you who are, let's say, philosophically inclined? We kind of like drawn to philosophical thinking that resonates with my thinking. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
sure.
So I'm as guilty of it as any, you know. I mean, I love philosophy, you know, but it is a way of for the self again to manifest and sort of like enhance itself by okay, yet another theory or understanding that I can put into my bag, you know, I can add to in other words, the self likes to accumulate information, accumulate what it considers as wisdom. Another way of saying it is, well, this another aspect of this accumulative tendency is that, you know, when, let's say, when things happen, when there's a more like it actually happens more than we notice, that the self does disappear for a fraction of a second now and then, but it goes so fast that because the self is always ready to sort of establish itself again and again and again, we are not aware of those infinitesimally small fractions of seconds when the self was not there, typically. But sometimes, some of you have even shared with me that you have had these openings where the self was not there. So then in the next moment, the self arises and says, what was that? How do I make sense of it? How do I understand it? that's how the self wants to appropriate even the experience of the moment of awakening. Okay, so what do we do with this kind of self? In many spiritual traditions, we try to get rid of it, and the people who are sort of on that kind of path to get rid of the self, they suffer a lot because they are in conflict all the time. Isn't that kind of familiar in some way to many of us? A little bit milder form that is more common today is that, okay, maybe I don't need to get rid of myself, but I need to improve it. It needs to be better. So then I'm in conflict between the self that I am at this moment and the improved self that I'm not yet. You following me? So then there's that conflict. So the question is there a different way?
No, it's about perception. At the point when you start to suffer, it's a sufferance because you feel like a sufferance. But at the end, after you pass over a different stage, you will not suffer anymore because you, I don't know, it's adaptation. Yeah.
Adaptation?
You used to eat, or you transit to another level of consciousness, and you will not have the same perception you suffer for the same action or for the same.
Okay, so
I'm speaking from the view of some saints, maybe, from different religion, different religions have saints, and they suffer at the beginning, but at the end they not.
okay, but so don't we want to understand what's the difference? Like what's the secret of not suffering?
It's about perception.
But what is the? You see, that's.
And how you feel maybe that self, at the moment and after time.
Yeah, but still, if we really want to inquire, it's not enough to say, okay, it's a matter of perception, unless we really perceive that way. Do you see what I mean? So what is that way of perceiving where there's no suffering?
Because are you leading to the idea that maybe we have to accept the self as it is?
Well, a little more than that, because do we know the self as it is?
We know it as it manifests.
Well, only to the extent that we do witness it manifesting. Okay, so there are all kinds of sort of even the holy texts and the authentic text. They say, okay, the self is this and this and this, and then we say, yeah, it's this and this and this, but it's not the same as really knowing the self. Yeah, and most of those descriptions are pretty negative. To make you want to get rid of it. Do you see what I mean? But then here we are. It's so that's why I'm sort of like moving in a somewhat different direction, and that is that the self. I'm going to just say it, but then don't take my word for it. Find out. The self is not capable of being enlightened, free of suffering. It's not in its nature. So if we thoroughly understand the self as it manifests moment to moment in, as this self manifests from one moment to the next, and each moment we fully understand its nature, then we naturally would not condemn it or try to reject it or suppress it. So what I'm saying is that it's one thing to say that, okay, just accept yourself. Well, what am I to accept unless I know what I'm accepting? So that's why a deepening of understanding of the self as it manifests in all kinds of subtle ways becomes really important, and the more your sort of experiential direct seeing, understanding of all the subtle and sneaky manifestations and very subtle ones of the self as you sort of in the flow of experience, then you would not be inclined to judge, to criticize, to reject, to fight. You would be okay.
So-
I mean, I know this is again language, the you know, but okay, but let's say it this way, that there wouldn't be the division of oneself fighting another.
The conflict.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that the suffering belongs to the self. So it's not my suffering, it's his. So he can suffer.
Well, yeah, but you know, the kind of understanding. See, the Buddha always said that if you understand the causes and conditions of suffering, you know, the second noble truth, the causes and conditions of suffering, then you know, and then you will. The removal of the conditions and causes will happen. Now, of course, you know, because it's the self is an enormously complex kind of, pardon my language, thing. You know, each moment it has an enormous complexity. When we remember, and today more than any other time, we have a kind of a sophistication that goes up to a point about understanding the self that maybe a couple of hundred years ago people seldom had, and that is that we now appreciate that most of what the self is and does is unconscious. So once you start sort of like investigating into the sort of the layers of consciousness that are not ordinarily sort of in our readily in our attention, then you really begin to see, wow, you know, this is a huge thing to penetrate all these layers. I'm using metaphors here, you know, don't take me too seriously, but to have the light of awareness penetrate all these layers of unconsciousness, because in those layers we have the conditioning of the species, which is the knee-jerk response to survive and preserve and protect. And there's then also the layer of cultural conditioning. And then there's the layer of the family conditioning. And some of you, I know, just even talking a little bit with some of you, that there's something in our time, everywhere today, and not just in America or UK or some other countries, but people are kind of starting to have a kind of sense of their own family conditioning. Not enough to be instantly free of it. You following me? But sort of like aware that, oh, I'm carrying a heavy load here and I'm pretty helpless. It's determining how I react to other people. You following me? Yeah.
It has been scientifically proved recently.
It has been.
Yeah, in DNA chains.
Yes.
Conditions there have been proved.
So there's that layer of conditioning.
Epigenetics, maybe he means. Epigenetics. How cultural conditioning is affecting the DNA that's going to.
Oh yeah, you know, it's so now there's an understanding that it actually the causal sort of effect, it goes both ways.
Yeah,
It's not just that one determines the other, but they both influence you know, the whatever the. So without going into all the science of it, imagine yourself seeing through all of that. It's possible. That's what the Buddha was trying to tell us. It is possible to be free of all suffering, because it is possible to understand the causes and conditions of suffering. But it is, it's not like a picnic in the park kind of endeavor. It's a very serious endeavor for most of us. I can never say all, you know, but you know, for me, it's a lifetime kind of journey. Yes.
Did you succeed in that journey?
Did I succeed? Well, I'm still.
Are you enlightened? Come on, she was waiting.
No, seriously, I'm not. But you
Of
know.
course, the self can never say it is enlightened, even if it is.
But you know, like, okay, here's what I want. I'm evading just a little bit, if you let me. But really, I mean, I can seriously say, no, I'm not. Look at me. You know, I've aches and pains and so on and so on. But
the Buddha was like that too. He had aches and pains, and the body was growing old.
oh, okay, so let me, yeah, okay, yeah. So let me give you a little preview. You know, if you're interested, things become easier. Things not just easier, but there's a kind of a bliss and a sense of vastness in the sort of like in the horizon of consciousness. I'm describing my own, even though I still get sometimes sort of caught up in things. You know what I mean? But even simultaneously, there's like somehow in the background awareness, somewhere like a big smile, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Don't you think that this would have happened naturally anyway?
Well, I look at a lot of old people who don't seem to be wise. They go out of this life kicking and screaming. You know what I mean? And well, that's okay. You know, why not? But somehow it's not enough for me, and I don't think it's enough for you guys.
And staying upset all the time. There are so
Yeah.
many people staying upset or criticize.
And so of course, many people get used to being upset. In fact, you know, I also do psychotherapy. Some of you know. So it's amazing. Some patients, they feel more at home, more comfortable when they are in a huge sort of a drama of suffering. Then they feel like they are okay. This is who I am, and you know, if nothing is going on, they start kind of like, okay, where's my anchors? Who am I? So people, we all of us are really crazy. I can say that only because I know I am. Meaning that all these kinds of tendencies are in all of us, however little. But some are like helplessly caught up in acting them out, you know, and then their lives are intensely miserable, you know. But then again, some people, as I said, get used to being miserable, and they, you know, we are really creatures of habit, you know, and so we tend to sort of gravitate back to what we know, even if it's even if it's crazy, even if it's miserable, you know. So we don't just go for pleasure. We kind of gravitate for what we know. It feels safe and secure and comfortable because it's familiar.
Genetics.
Huh?
Genetics.
Genetic? No, what?
Yeah, genetics.
So
Maybe at a very deep level, there's that. Yeah.
so Kaisa, let's say like go back to the example of lunch,
Yes.
and you observe the self wanting more,
Yes.
the grasping.
Yes.
So the tendency is just to observe it,
Mm-hmm.
but not act on it. Just like being like, okay, I'm seeing myself that even though I'm full or I'm grasping for more pleasure.
So,
So how-
let's see if we can, because I don't want to establish a rule. I know there are plenty in the practice traditions, including Theravada. You know.
There's just rules. The monks have about 280 something rules they have to strictly
Yeah,
follow.
and so I'm not going to introduce yet another rule for you. There probably is already in the books, this one, but so. Okay, so let's say that that you catch yourself, meaning that you suddenly notice that you are like, okay, I want more, and so then you see this is how the self is arising. But if you are not just sort of like watching it like a hawk that wants to catch it and kill it, you know, if you are bringing equanimity, you know, open, non-reactive attentiveness to this moment of grasping, then I'm sure you have had these moments when you were able to bring some non-reactive openness to it with awareness, attention, and there's a kind of like a space metaphor, again, pardon me, you know, but sort of like a mental in the psychic space, as though there's more space opening up. There's, okay, so here's this grasping happening, but there's a kind of a larger space of awareness that is holding it now. Are you following me? And then, you know, without judging that grasping, like, oh, that's bad. No, you're just, you know, there's just that awareness. In the space of that awareness, you can hopefully also extend the awareness into your body. And then that awareness will know, because it makes direct contact also with the body, whether you actually need more. You know, we talk about sort of like tuning into the body, you know, rather than going by some external rules. You know, I have sometimes, many times, innumerable times, like found my awakened in the moment of sort of grasping, okay, I'm going to have more, and then sometimes I just go ahead and have more, right? But other times, and then I sort of like, in the next moment, I know whether I really am going to have more or not, if that makes sense. And you know, there are no overweight people here, and to me it's like so pleasing for my eyes to look at you guys, because in America everybody, I mean, 2/3 of the population are overweight, and then a good proportion is really obese. So a lot of people are trying to lose weight, you know, because they're kind of like addicted, they're constantly grasping, you know, and so I'm no expert in that subject matter of how to lose weight, but you know, one of my long-term psychotherapy patients is finally coming to that place where he wants to get in shape. He wants to become in tune with his body, and so only now we end up doing a little bit of vipassana with him. You know, for all these years, not really. You know, but when it came to all his big traumas are done, and he's no longer wanting to go back to living in the drama, and he's okay. I have a life. He's becoming himself, and so the last piece of that seems to be, oh, I think I want to lose weight. I have this huge, you know, I'm not, and I say, okay, not just looking in the mirror, but how do you feel? You know, so bit by bit he's starting to get in touch with how it feels to be in his body. For all these years he had no sense of how it felt to be in the body. He would look in the mirror and get upset. You know, but now he's starting to, and so I really think that, you know, the more we are in touch with our bodies, we naturally take care of it, and there's some room for, you know, this is just my personal, you know, indulgence, just for the hell of it, to break the rules. You know what I mean? But you know, for those who are have the tendency to be ascetic, you know, and to go by rules and impose rules on themselves. For them, it's really good sometimes to break loose, get drunk, whatever. But that's not the. I'm not recommending that it becomes like sort of the way to be. You know.
One glass, then it's the whole bottle.
Yeah. Well, you know, whatever it is, you know, but I don't know. So we're probably going too long, but you know, earlier in my life I was a pretty sort of puritanical vegetarian before anybody else was. You know, I was a young person at the time when being a vegetarian was not the in thing. Almost nobody was, except my small circle of friends. And at some point I started feeling uncomfortable because there's this, like a feeling of my friends being somehow too pure. Do you know what I mean? Too pure.
Your friends were too pure, or you were too pure?
Well, me too, because I
Oh.
was subscribing to it, and so I would start talking like my vegetarian friend. Well, what if we found ourselves, let's say, stranded in the snow in with you know, with some Eskimo. We find an Eskimo who is starving to death, you know, and we have a fish. Would you give it to them? And she would say, no. Come on. You know? Yeah, and so
She would eat the fish herself.
no, she's, you know, because she wouldn't. You see, that's what I mean by being pure. Purity can get in the way of compassion and love, you know. And when it sort of has that edge that makes you less loving and compassionate, less willing to embrace, then I think it's time to kind of examine, I feel, you know, those rules, you know, and how strictly I go by them.